Miss Hartwell's shadow fell over my desk before the paper, my calculus exam, defaced by a glaring red zero. It was scrawled across equations I knew with a certainty transcending this body, solutions from my past life, the one that earned a Fields Medal. Well, Mr. Chen, Miss Hartwell purred, voice dripping condescending sweetness, rather definitive, wouldn't you agree? Perhaps advanced math isn't your forte, suited to less abstract endeavors? She didn't wait, heels clicking away. I stared at the scarlet insult. A zero, I whispered, disbelief a cold stone. She gave this a zero. The sheer audacity. Chalk dust in the afternoon sun suddenly smelled achingly familiar. Princeton's lecture hall where I, Alistair Finch, died at 35. Princeton, I breathed, an echo. That scent was the key, unlocking it all. The classroom wavered, a flimsy set. It's all coming back. My 18-year-old hands trembled, not with nerves, but the shock of recalled genius. Cold rage warred with the impossible flood of knowledge. It's all here, I muttered, fists clenched. Every theorem, every proof. Damn it, every breakthrough I haven't discovered yet. The weight was immense. How is this possible? Panic flared. The college application deadline, I realized, a frantic internal scream. Tomorrow, midnight. This zero would obliterate my MIT dreams. She can't destroy everything, I vowed, resolve hardening. I won't let her. I have to act. Now. My fingers, still shaking but now with purpose, fumbled for my phone. The screen lit up, an impersonal glow in the fading afternoon light. An email. That's it. Direct, forceful. Okay, Alex. I coached myself under my breath. Think. Who do I send this to? Not Hartwell. She's clearly... I trailed off, the word corrupt or ignorant feeling too mild for the fury simmering in me. No, higher up. Someone who understands the stakes. My mind raced through the school hierarchy. Dr. Morrison, District Mathematics Coordinator. Perfect. My thumbs flew across the virtual keyboard, adrenaline thrumming through me like a live wire. Subject line, I mumbled. Urgent, grading anomaly, AP Calculus BC, Alex Chen. Too bland? No, it has to be professional, at least at first. I began to type, the words forming with a strange duality. The desperate plea of an 18-year-old and the unshakable authority of a Fields medalist. Dear Dr. Morrison, I typed, then paused. What next? My teacher, Miss Hartwell, has made a grievous error that could jeopardize my future? I shook my head. Too accusatory. Need evidence. Undeniable evidence. My gaze fell upon the exam paper, the mocking zero. Then my eyes drifted to the scratch paper I'd submitted with it, pages filled not with tentative workings, but with fully formed, elegant proofs of theorems that, in this world, were still considered unsolved conjectures. The P versus NP problem's new angle, a concise proof for Goldbach's conjecture, and my notes on the Riemann hypothesis. I'd included them almost on a whim, a flex from a past life, never imagining they'd be met with such catastrophic incomprehension. Right, I whispered, a grim smile touching my lips. Let's give him something to really think about. I snapped photos of the scratch work, each image a ticking time bomb. Attaching them to the email, I continued drafting. I am writing to request an urgent review of my recent AP Calculus BC examination, graded by Miss Victoria Hartwell. While the examination itself contained standard calculus problems, the supplementary work I provided, which formed the basis of my solutions and was intended to demonstrate advanced understanding, appears to have been... What? Misunderstood? Ignored? I scoffed. Marked as entirely incorrect. My internal monologue was a frantic debate. Should I explain what these proofs are? Does Morrison even have the background to recognize them instantly? Probably not all of them, not without context. But the sheer audacity of submitting them, that should raise a flag. I continued typing. I believe a serious misunderstanding has occurred regarding the nature and validity of my solutions. For your immediate perusal, I have attached copies of this supplementary work. I am confident that a review by a qualified mathematician will clarify the situation. I reread it. Is it enough? Does it convey the urgency? The MIT deadline is a ticking clock in my head. 24 hours now, maybe less. I need to be clear about the implications of her zero, I thought, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. This grade, as it stands, will have a severely detrimental impact on my college applications, the deadline for which is tomorrow at midnight. I added that sentence, the words feeling like a lead weight. Okay, what else? I would appreciate an opportunity to discuss this with you at your earliest convenience. Perhaps even before the official transcripts are sent? Too desperate? No, it's a legitimate concern. I added it. This email, I muttered, hitting send with a decisive tap, is either going to save me or make things 1,000 times worse. But doing nothing? That's a guaranteed failure. The whoosh of the sent email was deafening in the sudden silence of my resolve. Now to wait, and hope Morrison isn't just another Hartwell. The email was gone, launched into the digital ether, carrying with it the photographic evidence of my scratch work. 3 theorems. Not just any theorems, but titans of the mathematical world, problems that had humbled geniuses for decades, some for centuries. The Goldbach conjecture proof was particularly neat, I mused, a flicker of Alistair Finch's academic pride momentarily warming the cold dread in my stomach. Alistair spent years refining that approach. To see it dismissed with a zero? My thoughts then drifted to the other attachments. And the new perspectives on P versus NP. If Dr. Morrison has any real mathematical acumen, he won't just see elaborate high school scribbles. He can't. My notes on the Riemann hypothesis were perhaps the most audacious inclusion. Did I overdo it with that one? I wondered, a fresh wave of anxiety washing over me. Will he even open attachments from a student he's never met, complaining about a grade? Will he think it's some elaborate hoax, or worse, plagiarism? The die was cast regardless. No going back now, Alex, I told myself sternly. You hit send. Now you deal with the fallout. My heart still hammered a frantic rhythm against my ribs, a mix of fear and a strange, exhilarating sense of inevitability. This isn't just about MIT anymore, is it? I acknowledged internally. This is about truth. My truth. Alistair's truth. The classroom was emptying, the chatter of departing students a dull roar in the background. Miss Hartwell was still at her desk, tidying papers, a picture of unruffled authority. Or so she thought. Right, I resolved, pushing myself up from my desk, the motion feeling strangely disconnected, as if I were watching myself from afar. Phase 2. I approached her desk just as the last few students trickled out, their curious, backward glances thankfully brief. Miss Hartwell looked up, her expression carefully neutral, but her eyes held that familiar flicker of disdain she reserved for me. Yes, Mr. Chen. Did you forget something? She asked, her tone suggesting I was an unwelcome interruption to her oh-so-important end-of-day routine. My dignity, perhaps? I thought, but bit back the sarcastic retort. This required a different approach. I took a steadying breath. Miss Hartwell? I began, my voice surprisingly even, betraying none of the turmoil inside. I think there's been a mistake with my grade on the calculus exam. I paused, letting the statement hang in the air. A significant one, actually. Her perfectly sculpted eyebrow arched. A mistake, Mr. Chen? She repeated, as if the concept were utterly foreign to her. I assure you, all papers are graded with the utmost care and according to a stringent rubric. I understand that's the intention, I continued, keeping my gaze locked on hers. However, given the nature of my solutions and their unconventional approach, I believe a second opinion might be warranted. Perhaps Dr. Morrison, the district's mathematics coordinator, should review this before my transcript officially goes out to colleges tomorrow? I let the name and the implicit challenge settle. I've already taken the liberty of forwarding him the relevant materials for his consideration. Her face, usually a mask of smug composure, did a fascinating series of contortions. For a fleeting second, something akin to shock, or perhaps even fear, widened her eyes and slackened her jaw. I saw the blood drain from her cheeks, leaving her skin a pasty, unhealthy white, as she processed my words and, more importantly, the name Dr. Morrison. I held up my phone, displaying the first page of my Riemann hypothesis notes. A dense tapestry of symbols and equations that would be indecipherable to a layman, but to a mathematician, even one as apparently inept as Hartwell, should have screamed of something far beyond a high schooler's capability. This, for example, I said, my voice quiet but firm, is part of what you marked as a zero. She stared at the screen, her pallor intensifying for another moment, before the mask slammed back into place. Her recovery was impressively quick, a testament to years of practice in maintaining her facade, I supposed. She drew herself up, her lips thinning into a severe line. Mathematical nonsense, Mr. Chen. She spat, her voice regaining its icy dismissiveness, though a slight tremor betrayed her inner agitation. Elaborate scribbles and gibberish won't change your zero. You clearly failed to understand the assigned problems. She waved a hand airily. Dr. Morrison will see it for what it is. A desperate attempt by a failing student to avoid the consequences of his lack of preparation. Is that what you truly believe this is? I asked, a genuine curiosity in my tone now. Just nonsense. 18 hours. That's all that remained until the MIT application portal sealed shut, taking my dreams with it if this zero stood. I watched Miss Hartwell turn away, a dismissive flick of her wrist, my only answer to my last question. Her shoulders were a little too rigid, her head held a fraction too high. She's rattled, I realized with a grim certainty, but she's not broken, not yet. I could practically see the gears grinding in her head, the frantic calculations beginning. She knows what I sent Morrison isn't nonsense, I thought, a cold knot tightening in my gut. She might not understand it all, but she saw enough on that screen to be scared. And a scared person, especially one with something to hide, was a dangerous one. She's not going to just wait for Morrison's verdict, I concluded, my mind racing. She's going to try and discredit me. She has to. Her career, her reputation, whatever she's built this little kingdom on, depends on that zero being legitimate. The image of her smug face as she'd handed back my paper flashed in my mind. She'll try to paint me as a cheater, a plagiarist, a deluded fantasist. Anything to make my claims look absurd before Morrison even has a chance to seriously review the proofs. The fight, I understood with chilling clarity, had only just begun. And she has a head start. The 18 hours felt like a rapidly shrinking cage. My earlier confrontation with Miss Hartwell had left a bitter taste of apprehension, a certainty that she wouldn't remain idle. She's not just going to sit there and wait for Dr. Morrison to call, I'd muttered to myself as I paced my room later that afternoon, the walls feeling too close. She called my work nonsense to my face, but her eyes told a different story. She was scared. That fear wouldn't make her rational. It would make her dangerous. As evening descended, a gnawing unease pulled me back towards the school. It was a long shot, a wild hunch, but I couldn't shake the feeling that Hartwell might still be there, plotting. The main building was dark and silent, but a faint sliver of light emanated from the teacher's lounge window. Bingo, I breathed, my pulse quickening. The parking lot held only a few cars, one of them unmistakably hers. I slipped through a side door I knew was often faulty, the click of the latch echoing unnaturally loud in the deserted hallway. The lounge door was slightly ajar, a narrow crack offering a sliver of vision and, more importantly, sound. And there she was, a hunched silhouette against the dim light, phone pressed tightly to her ear, her voice a low, urgent thrum. Her usual composure had vanished. Every line of her body radiated pure, unadulterated panic. She's definitely on the phone about me, I thought, pressing myself closer to the cool, painted brick of the hallway. Let's hear what the Chen problem entails from her perspective. Her words, sharp and laced with an almost hysterical edge, confirmed my suspicions immediately. No, you don't understand the gravity of this. It's not just some overachieving student challenging a grade. A pause, then her voice dropped further, becoming more conspiratorial, more desperate. He calls himself Alex Chen, but the work he submitted, some of it, it's almost identical to sections of the restricted Yamamoto papers from 2019. Yamamoto. The name echoed in my mind, Alistair Finch's portion of my brain immediately trying to place it. Yamamoto. Theoretical physics. Some crossover into pure mathematics? Wasn't there a rumor about a breakthrough that was suppressed or classified around then? My internal archivist was rusty on the gossip of a past life, but the name definitely rang alarm bells. Restricted papers, I whispered to myself, the implications starting to dawn. Why would high school calculus scratch work resemble restricted academic research unless Hartwell's voice, rising in pitch again, cut through my thoughts? I don't know how he got it. That's what I'm trying to tell you. It's not supposed to be public knowledge. Are you listening to me? She sounded like she was on the verge of tears or a full-blown meltdown. If anyone connects his solutions to Yamamoto's actual work before we can shut this down, her voice trailed off, choked with what sounded like genuine terror. The Chen problem, I mused grimly, is apparently a much bigger problem than I thought. And apparently, it's your problem too, Miss Hartwell. You don't understand the full picture, she hissed into the phone, her voice a venomous whisper that still carried clearly to my hiding spot. It's not a matter of if it's similar. It's practically a reproduction. The kids somehow, miraculously or deviously, I don't care which, reproduced classified research. Do you have any idea what that means for us if this gets out? Us? The word snagged in my consciousness. Who was us? We have to discredit him, she continued, her voice hardening with a desperate resolve. Thoroughly, unequivocally, before anyone realizes what happened. Before anyone starts asking how a high school senior in my class could possibly generate material that mirrors work that only a handful of people in the world should even know exists. There was a longer pause. She was clearly getting an earful from the person on the other end. No. I know the official channels are slow, she interjected, frustration evident. We can't wait for a formal inquiry. By then, it'll be too late. His email to Morrison might not be a Fields medalist, but he's not an idiot. He'll recognize the sophistication, even if he doesn't know the source. He'll ask questions. And if he starts digging... She took a shaky breath. Look, just tell me, what's the protocol for academic fraud by a student when the material is sensitive? Can we claim he hacked something? Is there a precedent? There has to be a way to bury this, and him with it. The venom in her last words sent a chill down my spine. This wasn't just about protecting her job anymore. This was about a cover-up. The ancient coffee machine in the lounge chose that exact moment to emit a series of loud volcanic gurgles as it finished a brewing cycle. The sudden noise was a cannon shot in the silent hallway, and I flinched, certain she must have heard my sharp, involuntary intake of breath. But Hartwell was too engrossed in her panic. Or perhaps the gurgling was a common enough sound in that room. She didn't react. My heart, however, was now trying to beat its way out of my chest, not from fear of discovery, but from the sudden blinding flash of insight the gurgling had somehow triggered, a mental catalyst. Restricted Yamamoto papers from 2019. Her frantic need to discredit me before anyone realizes her PhD, which she always flaunted as being from a prestigious, if slightly obscure European university, completed around 2020 or 2021. The pieces slammed together in my mind with the force of a physical blow. Oh my God, I mouthed, the words soundless. It wasn't just that she didn't understand my proofs. She recognized elements of them, or at least they were terrifyingly familiar to her. The coffee machine gurgled again, a mocking punctuation mark to my revelation. She's been stealing unpublished mathematical research. The thought blazed across my consciousness. She used the restricted Yamamoto papers, or parts of them, in her graduate thesis. That's her dirty secret. That's why she's so terrified. My work doesn't just make her look incompetent. It threatens to expose her as a fraud, a plagiarist. The zero on my paper wasn't just a mark of ignorance. It was an act of self-preservation. My mind was a maelstrom. The MIT deadline, the injustice of the zero, even my own strange reincarnation. It all momentarily receded, dwarfed by the sheer, breathtaking audacity of Hartwell's academic crime. This wasn't just a high school teacher trying to cover up a grading mistake anymore. This was potentially career-ending, reputation-destroying plagiarism at the highest levels of academia. She built her entire career on stolen work, I realized, the cold fury from earlier returning with a vengeance. But this time it was sharper, more focused. And she was willing to destroy a student's future to protect her lies. I had to get out of there. Every second I lingered increased the risk of discovery, and I now had information far more valuable and dangerous than I'd initially bargained for. Holding my breath, I slowly, carefully eased away from the door, my sneakers making no sound on the polished linoleum. Each step felt like a mile. Once around the corner, I broke into a silent run, not stopping until I burst out of the side door and into the biting chill of the night air. The cold reality of the situation hit me full force. My mind was indeed racing, processing the new variables, the new stakes, operating with a clarity and speed that even Alistair Finch in his prime would have envied. This isn't just about getting into MIT anymore, I thought, looking up at the indifferent stars. This is about exposing her. But how do I do that without implicating myself in knowing things Alex Chen shouldn't know? The game had just acquired several new, terrifying dimensions. The shrill insistence of my phone's alarm at 6 a.m. felt like an attack. Sleep had been a fitful, shallow affair, my mind still churning with last night's revelations about Miss Hartwell and the Yamamoto papers. 18 hours, I'd thought, staring at my darkened ceiling, minus whatever sleep I might get. Then the MIT deadline hits. Every possible scenario had played out in my head, most of them ending in disaster. I dragged myself out of bed, the weight of impending doom settling comfortably on my shoulders like an old, unwelcome coat. Shower, coffee, then figure out how to salvage a future from this train wreck, I muttered, the words a sour puff of air in the quiet room. As I robotically went through the motions, a new kind of dread began to creep in. The wait for Dr. Morrison's reaction. He got my email late last night, I reasoned, toweling my hair with vigor. He's probably reading it right now, over his morning cornflakes, thinking, who is this delusional kid? Or worse, he's already spoken to Hartwell. She's probably fed him a mountain of lies about my erratic behavior or cheating concerns. The silence from the district was deafening. I checked my phone for the 10th time, thumbs swiping at the screen. Nothing. Come on, Morrison, I urged the unresponsive device. Give me something, anything. Just as I was about to concede defeat and head to school to face another day of Hartwell's icy glares, my inbox chimed. An email from j.morrison@schooldistrict.org. My breath hitched. This is it, I whispered, tapping it open with a trembling finger. The subject line was innocuous, regarding your AP Calculus BC examination. My eyes scanned the opening pleasantries. Dear Mr. Chen, thank you for your email and the attached documents. Searching for the inevitable dismissal. Here it comes, I braced myself. While your enthusiasm is noted, Miss Hartwell's assessment stands. Something like that. But the next sentence made me blink. And blink again. He says, the materials you provided are quite extraordinary and raise questions that extend beyond a simple grading review. I read it aloud, the words feeling alien in my mouth. Extraordinary? Questions beyond a simple review? My heart began to thump, a hopeful, cautious rhythm. What does that mean? The email continued. Miss Hartwell did indeed contact me yesterday afternoon to express certain concerns regarding your conduct and the unusual nature of your submitted work following your discussion with her. Ah, there it is, I almost shouted, a bitter laugh escaping me. She tried to get ahead of it. Concerns regarding my conduct. That poisonous snake. I could picture Hartwell's carefully constructed narrative of the troubled, possibly cheating student. But Morrison's next lines completely derailed my expectations. However, given the advanced and frankly fascinating nature of the mathematical arguments presented in your attachments, I believe this situation warrants a more formal and expert evaluation. My eyes widened. Formal? Expert? I scrolled down, my gaze snagging on the crucial paragraph. Therefore, I have taken the liberty of arranging an ad hoc session with select members of the State Mathematics Review Board. They have expressed a keen interest in hearing from you directly. Would you be available to present your work to them tomorrow afternoon at 2 p.m. at the District Conference Center? I sank onto the edge of my bed, the phone nearly slipping from my grasp. The State Mathematics Review Board? I stammered, the words barely coherent. Present my work? Tomorrow? A hysterical giggle bubbled up. Miss Hartwell's desperate attempt to control the narrative, to paint me as a delusional nuisance or a cunning fraud to Dr. Morrison, had backfired. Spectacularly. She wanted him to bury me, I said to the empty room, a wide, disbelieving grin spreading across my face. Instead, he's handed me a microphone and aimed it at the entire state. Morrison, it seemed, wasn't the easily manipulated drone Hartwell had likely counted on. He was either a genuine academic with an eye for the exceptional, or he was savvy enough to recognize a potential powder keg and wanted expert eyes on it immediately. Perhaps both, I mused. He saw something in those proofs, something that made him pause Hartwell's smear campaign and think, wait a minute. The email detailed the board members, a university department head, a curriculum specialist with a PhD in number theory, even a retired cryptographer. These aren't just high school teachers, I realized with a jolt. These are people who will understand what they're looking at. Or at least they'll understand that it's nothing a typical high school student should be producing. The sheer, beautiful irony of it was almost too much. Hartwell had tried to extinguish a spark and had inadvertently fanned it into a potential inferno. She must be incandescent with rage right now, I thought with no small amount of satisfaction. Or pure, unadulterated terror, probably both. The email ended with a polite, "Please confirm your availability at your earliest convenience." Confirm, I laughed. Oh, Dr. Morrison, I will be there with bells on and a slideshow. This was it, the chance I didn't even know I was hoping for. Hartwell had played her hand, and now the deck was reshuffling in a way she could never have anticipated. She wanted a quiet kill, I strategized, already feeling the old Alistair Finch instincts kick in. Now she gets a public dissection. Her move, Morrison's counter, and now it's my turn. Tomorrow, I repeated, the single word hanging heavy in the air, charged with a dizzying mix of opportunity and monumental risk. The MIT deadline still loomed, a ticking clock now almost a secondary concern to the immediate, high-stakes performance required of me. Tomorrow afternoon, I'll stand before a panel of judges, bona fide mathematicians and academics, people who have dedicated their lives to the very fields Alistair, revolutionized. The thought was both exhilarating and terrifying. And what am I going to present? Proofs of theorems that, according to the current timeline of this world, aren't scheduled to be officially discovered or solved for another 3, 5, maybe even 10 years. I started pacing the small confines of my bedroom, the mental gears turning at an almost painful speed. How do I even begin to explain that? Good afternoon, esteemed members of the board. My name is Alex Chen, I'm 18, and by the way, here's a complete solution to the Riemann hypothesis that humanity isn't supposed to crack for another decade. Any questions? A bead of sweat trickled down my temple. They'll think I'm insane, or a plagiarist of some future undiscovered genius. How do you plagiarize something that doesn't exist yet in the public domain? The absurdity of my situation was a unique brand of torment. Alistair Finch had faced skeptical audiences, hostile reviewers, and the crushing weight of expectation, but never anything quite like this. He was presenting his work, the fruit of his labor, within a recognized framework of academic progress. I was an imposter, a temporal anomaly armed with knowledge that, by all rights, I shouldn't possess. Okay, breathe, Alex. Breathe, Alistair. Whoever the hell is in charge right now, I coached myself, pressing my palms against my eyes. Panic is a luxury you can't afford. What would Alistair do? The answer came swiftly. He'd analyze the variables, calculate the odds, and prepare with meticulous, unwavering focus. The board members, I thought, pulling up the email again and studying their names and affiliations. Dr. Evelyn Hayes, head of mathematics at State University. She's a specialist in algebraic geometry. She'll recognize the sophistication of the P versus NP approach. Dr. Samuel Green, retired NSA. His interest in cryptography means he'll be looking for patterns, for unassailable logic. He won't be easily fooled by hand-waving. My mind raced, cataloging Alistair's vast repository of knowledge, cross-referencing it with the likely expertise of my judges. They won't just be looking at the what, They'll be dissecting the how, the methodology, the elegance of the proofs. And there lay my advantage and my biggest danger. The proofs were undeniably elegant, refined by a mind at its peak. Too refined for an 18-year-old? I worried. Will that be the giveaway? I had to frame it carefully. I can't claim it just came to me in a dream. I need a plausible narrative for Alex Chen, the gifted student, not Alistair Finch, the reincarnated laureate. Perhaps focus on the process, the journey of discovery, even if it's a fictionalized one for Alex. I can emphasize the supplementary work aspect, the exploratory calculations that led to these breakthroughs, rather than presenting them as definitive, final form theorems that dropped from the sky. The key was confidence, but not arrogance. I need to project an image of youthful brilliance, of intuitive leaps, perhaps even a touch of naive genius that stumbled upon something extraordinary. It was a tightrope walk over a chasm of disbelief. But what choice do I have? I asked the empty room. Hartwell has already painted me as either a fool or a fraud. This is my only chance to redefine the narrative, to show them something so compelling they have to question her judgment, not just mine. The thought of her squirming, of her carefully constructed world beginning to crumble, was a powerful motivator. Yes, I decided, a hard glint in my eye. Tomorrow, they'll see mathematics they never expected, and hopefully they'll start asking the right questions about why it was buried under a zero. The initial wave of anxiety, the cold fear of the impossible situation I found myself in, began to recede, replaced by a familiar, electrifying current. It was the thrill of the intellectual arena, the adrenaline surge of high-stakes mathematical combat that Alistair Finch had lived for. This isn't a defense hearing, I realized with a sudden, clarifying surge of energy. This is an ambush, my ambush. Panic was a fog. This feeling was a sharpened spear. My objective wasn't merely to save my grade or secure my spot at MIT, though those were still vital. No, the scope of the operation had just expanded considerably. This is my chance, I declared to my reflection in the darkened computer screen, to expose Hartwell, to show them not just that she was wrong, but how profoundly, how inexplicably wrong she was. I powered on my laptop, the soft whir of the fan, a comforting sound. She tried to silence genius with a mark of ignorance. Now that genius will speak, and it will be loud. My fingers flew across the keyboard, creating a new file. state_board_presentation_final.pptx. My mind was already several steps ahead, envisioning the slides, the flow of arguments, the precise points where I would pause for effect, the subtle barbs I would aim at a system that allowed such incompetence, such potential fraud, to flourish. I won't just present the theorems, I strategized, a predatory gleam in my eye. I'll frame their presentation. I'll talk about the joy of discovery, the pursuit of knowledge, the things a true educator should foster, not extinguish. Slide 1, title: Explorations in Advanced Calculus, A Student's Journey. Humble, non-threatening, I muttered, already typing. Slide 2, a brief, very brief, acknowledgement of Miss Hartwell's class as the springboard for these independent investigations. A little jab, veiled in politeness. I could almost taste the delicious irony. My focus narrowed, the room around me disappearing as Alistair's formidable intellect took the helm. The Yamamoto papers, Hartwell's terrified phone call, her clear plagiarism, these were aces up my sleeve, cards I had to play with extreme care. I can't directly accuse her of stealing Yamamoto's work in this presentation, I reasoned. Not without revealing how I know about restricted papers. That's too dangerous, too unbelievable for Alex Chen. But I could lay the groundwork. I could present my findings. Alistair's findings, with such clarity and irrefutable proof that any subsequent investigation into Hartwell's own suspiciously similar research would inevitably lead to her exposure. My presentation itself will be the catalyst, I thought. The theorems themselves, when recognized by the board for what they are, groundbreaking and years ahead of their time, will raise the question, how could any competent educator not see their value? How could they be dismissed as a zero? The beauty of it was that the mathematics itself would be my primary weapon. No need for overt accusations from me, not yet. The truth has its own voice, especially in mathematics. I delved into Alistair's old lecture notes, stored perfectly in my reincarnated memory, selecting the most elegant phrasings, the most compelling visual representations for the proofs. The Goldbach proof needs that animated sequence showing the prime pairings, I decided. For P versus NP, I'll use the tiered complexity diagrams Alistair perfected. Hours melted away. The sun climbed higher in the sky, unnoticed. My coffee grew cold, untouched. I was no longer Alex Chen, panicked teenager. I was Alistair Finch, the maestro, preparing for a command performance. "Tomorrow, Miss Hartwell," I whispered to the glowing screen, a grim smile playing on my lips. The lecture begins. And you, dear teacher, will be front and center for the lesson. The decision solidified around 4 a.m., fueled by lukewarm coffee and the gnawing certainty that the state board presentation, while a significant opportunity, wasn't enough. Miss Hartwell was desperate, and desperate people took desperate, unpredictable measures. She could try to discredit the material itself, I reasoned, staring at the complex equations Alistair Finch had painstakingly developed, now forming the core of my upcoming presentation. She could claim it's a sophisticated hoax, a fluke, something I couldn't possibly reproduce or truly understand, especially if she tries to muddy the waters before the hearing. The thought of my work, Alistair's legacy being dismissed or debated into oblivion by her machinations, was intolerable. "No," I resolved, a new, steely determination hardening my gaze. "This needs to be bigger than a committee room. This needs to be undeniable, time-stamped, and public. Globally public." There was only one place for that, the Mathematics Archive. The pre-print server was the lifeblood of the academic mathematics community, the place where research was shared, debated, and validated before formal publication. If I upload Alistair's complete portfolio, I thought, my heart beginning to hammer with a new kind of nervous energy, it's out there, irrevocably, judged not by one teacher or even one board, but by the entire world of mathematics. I logged into the archive, my fingers surprisingly steady. One by one, I began to upload the papers, 37 of them, a lifetime's work meticulously organized by a mind that no longer technically existed. Each one represented a significant breakthrough, a paradigm shift. The theory of harmonic manifolds, solvability of polynomial systems, quantum entanglement metrics. The titles alone, I knew, would cause ripples. Collectively, I whispered to the silent room as the final upload completed at precisely 6 a.m. They will revolutionize at least 3 fields of study. Let them call this mathematical nonsense. It was done. My second strike, far more potent than the first, was launched. "Now," I murmured, leaning back, a profound exhaustion mixing with a wild, almost reckless sense of triumph. "Let the world react." I must have drifted off at my desk because the next thing I knew, a hand was shaking my shoulder. I jolted awake, disoriented, the harsh fluorescent lights of the school library momentarily blinding me. It was Sarah Kim. Her usually composed face a mask of bewildered excitement, her eyes wide as dinner plates. "Alex! Alex, you will not believe this!" she whisper-shouted, practically vibrating with energy. It was just after 8 a.m. I'd evidently come to the library on autopilot after my archive spree, vaguely intending to refine my presentation slides, but exhaustion had claimed me. "Sarah, what's wrong?" I mumbled, trying to clear the fog from my brain. "What happened?" "Wrong? Nothing's wrong. Everything's insane." She thrust her phone into my face. "MIT just called the principal's office, like the Massachusetts Institute of Technology." My stomach did a complicated flip. MIT? Called? Why? Had Hartwell somehow already escalated things to them? Unlikely. "They're asking about you, Alex," Sarah continued, her voice a torrent of barely contained squeals. "They said your online submissions have caused a major stir. They said, oh my God, Alex, they said they're flying one of their top mathematics professors here today to meet with you." I stared at her, speechless. Flying someone here? Today? The argv upload. It had to be. "But it's only been a couple of hours," I stammered. "How could they even—" "I don't know," Sarah exclaimed, grabbing my arm. But Mr. Henderson, the principal, he looked like he'd seen a ghost. He told me to find you immediately. Said you have a meeting with a leading specialist from MIT this afternoon. This was moving faster than I could have ever imagined. The state board presentation suddenly felt like a quaint local talent show. MIT wasn't waiting, they were coming. A leading specialist, I echoed, my mind reeling. Not just a recruiter, someone who can actually vet my work on the spot. The implications were staggering. Sarah finally paused, her initial excitement giving way to a more concerned scrutiny of my Yavno exhausted state. Alex, are you okay? You look like you haven't slept in days. And what submissions are they talking about? What did you do? Her voice softened, genuine worry lacing her tone. I looked at her, my ally, the one person in this school who had consistently shown me kindness and believed in my abilities, even when I was just smart Alex and not reincarnated Fields medalist Alex. She deserved more than a half-truth. The weight of the secret, of Hartwell's plagiarism, of the Yamamoto papers was immense. Keeping it all bottled up was becoming unbearable. Sarah, I began, my voice low and heavy, leaning in so only she could hear. It's complicated, but Miss Hartwell? I took a deep breath. Miss Hartwell has been stealing from unpublished academic journals. Her entire career, her PhD, I think it's all built on mathematical plagiarism. The words hung in the air between us, a shocking, almost unbelievable accusation. Sarah's eyes widened even further, if that were possible. What? She whispered, her brow furrowing in disbelief. Stealing? Plagiarism? Alex, that's an incredibly serious thing to say. Miss Hartwell, are you sure? I saw things, heard things, I said, deliberately vague, not wanting to reveal the full extent of my nocturnal eavesdropping or my anachronistic knowledge. I have reasons to believe her entire doctoral thesis is fraudulent. That's why she gave me a 0, Sarah. My work? It must have looked too similar to what she stole. She panicked. I watched her try to process this, the cogs turning behind her intelligent eyes. She knew I was brilliant at math, but this was a different league of accusation. This wasn't about a misgraded test. This was about profound academic deceit. But how could you possibly know that, Alex? Sarah finally asked, her voice a mixture of skepticism and a dawning horror. The question I had been dreading and expecting. That implies you'd have to know about specific unpublished journals, about her thesis research. How? Before I could even attempt to formulate a convincing non-reincarnation-based answer, her phone, still clutched in her hand, buzzed violently, a series of rapid-fire notifications lighting up its screen. She glanced down, her expression shifting from questioning concern to utter, slack-jawed astonishment. Whoa, she breathed, scrolling through the alerts. Alex? What is this? She turned the screen towards me. News alerts. From major science publications, tech blogs, even a few mainstream news aggregators. Headlines blazed across the screen. Teen math prodigy rocks academia with groundbreaking ArgSiv submissions. Unprecedented portfolio by high school senior challenges established mathematical theories. 37 bombshell papers. Is Alex Chen the next Einstein? My picture, a slightly dorky school photo, was plastered next to several of them. My ArgSiv uploads hadn't just caused ripples. They'd triggered a tsunami. The academic world, it seemed, moved at lightning speed when something truly revolutionary dropped. That, I said quietly, a slow smile spreading across my face as I gestured towards her phone, is part of how. I put my work out there for everyone to see, the real work. Sarah looked from her phone to me and back again, her mouth opening and closing silently. The evidence of my extraordinary capabilities was now viral, undeniable. It didn't prove Hartwell was a plagiarist, not directly, but it certainly established that I was operating on a level far beyond any high school, or indeed many professional mathematicians. The buzzing of Sarah's phone seemed to fade into a dull hum as the full import of the situation settled over me. The MIT deadline, which had been a source of such acute anxiety less than 24 hours ago, now felt like a distant, almost trivial concern. They're sending a top professor, I thought, a sense of unreality washing over me. Today, MIT isn't waiting for a transcript with a corrected grade, they're coming to the source. My future wasn't riding on an application anymore, it was riding on the 37 papers currently igniting the global mathematics community. I had just become, in the space of a few hours, the most talked about and likely the most scrutinized teenager in the world of mathematics. A wave of dizziness made me grip the edge of the library table. Fame, even intellectual fame, was a terrifying prospect. But then I thought of Miss Hartwell. She knows, I realized with a chilling certainty. There's no way she hasn't heard. The school office knows, the principal knows. The news is breaking everywhere. She knows her zero is now a global laughingstock, a symbol of her own glaring incompetence, or worse. The power dynamic had irrevocably shifted. She could no longer dismiss me as a delusional student. The world was now watching. So, the MIT professor, Sarah finally managed, her voice filled with awe. Yeah, I said, meeting her gaze, the exhaustion momentarily forgotten, replaced by a resolute calm. I guess the quiet little grading dispute just went international. And Miss Hartwell, I knew, was in for a very, very bad day. The school auditorium buzzed with an electric tension I could taste, a metallic tang of anticipation and impending drama. It was a far cry from the sleepy calculus classroom where this whole insane saga had begun. Now, rows of seats were filled with a formidable assembly. Stern-faced members of the State Mathematics Review Board looking deeply uncomfortable with the media circus. A dozen or so university representatives, their expressions a mixture of curiosity and predatory recruitment. And a throng of reporters, cameras poised, microphones extended like hungry snouts. Sarah sat beside me in the front row reserved for key participants, her hand occasionally gripping mine with a reassuring squeeze that I suspected was more for her benefit than mine. Dr. Morrison paced nervously near the side stage, occasionally dabbing his brow with a handkerchief, clearly regretting the whirlwind he'd unleashed. And in a prominent seat, exuding an aura of calm, intense scrutiny, sat the distinguished professor from MIT, the one they'd flown in specially. Her gaze, when it briefly met mine, was unreadable but sharp, missing nothing. Then a hush fell as Miss Hartwell, flanked by the school principal who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else, walked stiffly towards the podium. She arranged her notes with hands that trembled almost imperceptibly, her face a carefully constructed mask of beleaguered integrity. "Showtime," I murmured under my breath, my own heart a steady, purposeful drum. I had my laptop ready, its contents a ticking bomb. She gets the first volley, I thought, remembering my earlier resolve. Let's see how she chooses to immolate herself. Miss Hartwell cleared her throat, the sound unnaturally loud in the sudden silence. Members of the board, representatives, esteemed guests, members of the press, she began, her voice strained but attempting a tone of grave authority. We are gathered today under unusual circumstances. Circumstances brought about by what I can only describe as a deeply troubling case of academic dishonesty. A murmur rippled through the reporters. My eyes met Sarah's. She gave a minute shake of her head, her expression one of disgust. The student in question, Alex Chen, Hartwell continued, her gaze flicking towards me with theatrical solemnity, submitted work of such an advanced nature that it initially perplexed us. Understatement of the century. However, upon closer investigation, and with information that has recently come to my attention, it has become clear. She paused for dramatic effect. Alex Chen has somehow gained access to restricted, highly confidential academic materials. Gasps now, louder this time. The reporters leaned in. The proofs he presented, the so-called scratch work that has generated such premature excitement, she said, her voice dripping with insinuation, are not his own. I have evidence, she declared, tapping a slim folder on the podium, that he has been cheating. Systematically, that he has illicitly obtained and presented complex research belonging to established academics as his own original thought. Her eyes, cold and reptilian, locked onto mine. This is not a case of genius, but of grand deception. Restricted materials? I thought, a slow, predatory smile touching my lips, though outwardly I remained impassive. Oh, Victoria, you've just handed me the loaded gun, haven't you? Before the principal or Dr. Morrison could intervene, Before the board could even formulate a question, I stood up, my laptop in hand. The sudden movement drew all eyes to me. "Miss Hartwell?" I called out, my voice clear and steady, cutting through the charged atmosphere. I walked purposefully towards the spare projector cable I'd spotted earlier, connecting my laptop with a decisive click. "That's a very serious accusation. And you mention restricted academic materials and established academics." My image, a mirror of my laptop screen, flickered onto the large display behind the podium, momentarily showing my neatly organized desktop. "Since we're discussing the provenance of advanced mathematical work," I continued, my fingers flying across the trackpad, opening two specific PDF files. "Would you perhaps like to explain to the board and to everyone else present how your own doctoral thesis, submitted in 2020, I highlighted the date on one document, contains entire sections, including proofs and theoretical frameworks that are virtually identical to Dr. Akira Yamamoto's unpublished research monograph dated May 2019. A collective intake of breath swept through the auditorium. Miss Hartwell, who had been watching my approach with a mixture of fury and apprehension, froze. The name Yamamoto and the dates had clearly struck a nerve, a very raw, very exposed nerve. Her carefully constructed composure began to visibly fray at the edges. "What? What are you talking about?" she stammered, her voice losing its earlier conviction. That's outrageous, preposterous." "Is it, Miss Hartwell?" I asked calmly, my voice resonating with an authority that belied my 18 years. With a final click, the two documents were displayed side by side on the massive screen behind her. Her thesis on the left, what I presented as excerpts from a known, unpublished 2019 monograph by Dr. Yamamoto on the right. I had, of course, meticulously recreated Alistair's memory of Yamamoto's key work, a gamble that it was distinct enough from anything publicly available to be shocking. Paragraph after paragraph, equation after equation, highlighted in damning red, marched in perfect, undeniable synchronicity across both documents. The silence in the auditorium was absolute, save for the frantic clicking of cameras. "As you can see," I narrated, my tone coolly academic, "the structural similarities are striking. The terminology, the unique methodological approaches, even specific turns of phrase, and the sequencing of proofs are mirrored. One might almost call it a direct translation, or perhaps a very faithful reproduction." Miss Hartwell's face, projected in ghastly magnification on smaller screens for the overflow crowd, seemed to visibly crumble. The blood drained from it, leaving behind a waxy yellowish pallor. Her eyes darted wildly from the screen to me, then to the stunned faces of the board members, then back to the damning evidence. The carefully constructed mask of the dedicated educator, the rigorous academic, shattered into a million pieces, revealing the terrified fraud beneath. The plagiarism was undeniable, starkly displayed for the world to see. "You stole it," I stated, the words cutting through the silence, not with anger, but with a quiet, firm finality. "You stole Dr. Yamamoto's unpublished research. You built your doctorate, your academic standing, your entire career as a mathematics expert on the intellectual property of another." I turned to face the audience, my voice rising slightly to carry through the auditorium. "And when I, through my own independent derivation of similar mathematical concepts that I now realize must have seemed terrifyingly familiar to you, submitted work that threatened to expose your fraud, you didn't grade it, you tried to bury it, you tried to silence me with a zero." I looked back at Miss Hartwell, whose mouth was opening and closing like a beached fish, no sounds emerging. "You accused me of accessing restricted materials, of cheating. But the only one in this room who has systematically exploited restricted, stolen work, Miss Hartwell, is you." The accusation hung in the air, heavy and irrefutable. Sarah was openly crying now, tears of relief and vindication. Dr. Morrison looked horrified, his gaze fixed on Hartwell with dawning comprehension and disgust. The reporters were in a frenzy, a low roar of questions beginning to build. Hartwell finally swayed, gripping the podium for support, her eyes glazed over. She was finished. Before the chaos could fully erupt, a clear, authoritative voice cut through the rising din. "Young man." All heads turned. The distinguished professor from MIT was standing, her expression one of profound seriousness, her gaze fixed intently on me. The room quieted instantly, her presence commanding an unexpected level of deference. Mr. Chen, she amended, her voice carrying easily. These theorems you've proven, the ones you submitted to the archive, the ones outlined in the documents you just displayed, and indeed the ones you intended to present to the board today? She paused, as if weighing her words carefully. They are not merely advanced for a student of your age. They represent a lifetime of dedicated work. For many mathematicians, work of this caliber is the culmination of an entire career, if they are fortunate enough to achieve it even once. Her eyes, sharp and discerning, held mine. The depth, the originality, the sheer scope of what you've laid out, it's breathtaking. Her words, delivered with such gravity, stripped away all the drama of Hartwell's exposure and focused squarely on the magnitude of the mathematics itself. It was a validation more profound than a corrected grade, more significant even than an MIT acceptance. It was the recognition of one true mathematician by another. Thank you, Professor, I said quietly, my voice thick, with an emotion I couldn't quite name. Perhaps Alistair's gratitude, finally finding an outlet. Then, I did the one thing no one could have predicted. I reached into the simple manila envelope I'd carried with me all day, an envelope that had sat innocuously on the floor beside my chair. My fingers closed around the cool, heavy metal within. Professor, I said, addressing the MIT luminary, but also the stunned room at large. You speak of a lifetime of work, of a career's culmination. I drew out the object, its gold surface gleaming dully under the auditorium lights. It was shockingly heavy, a solid medallion of achievement. The Fields Medal. Alistair Finch's Fields Medal, awarded to him in that other life, for work that encompassed many of the very theorems now causing such a stir. The one that had, through some inexplicable miracle of quantum entanglement or cosmic irony, traveled back through time and space with my consciousness. A collective gasp, a wave of pure, unadulterated shock, rippled through the auditorium. Even the unflappable MIT professor's eyes widened, her professional composure momentarily breaking. This, I said, my voice resonating with a quiet power that seemed to fill the vast space, holding the medal aloft for all to see, is what such a lifetime of work can achieve. I walked towards her, extending the medal. I already earned this once. I told the stunned auditorium, my voice carrying in the profound silence that had fallen. The weight of the Fields Medal in the MIT professor's hand felt symbolic, a tangible link between two impossible lives. Her expression was a maelstrom of shock, intrigue, and dawning, hesitant comprehension that this went far beyond a mere child prodigy. Cameras flashed relentlessly, but it felt distant, unreal. What does he mean by that? A reporter whispered loudly nearby. A sentiment echoed in the confused murmurs rippling through the crowd. Is that medal even real? Another hissed. He said earned it once? What kind of statement is that? Miss Hartwell, utterly broken, had been discreetly escorted away by a grim-faced principal and a sympathetic-looking Dr. Morrison, the architects of her downfall, now the agents of her quiet removal from the stage she had so arrogantly tried to command. My gaze swept over the remaining faces, the bewildered board members, the calculating university reps, Sarah's tear-streaked but beaming face. Let them wonder, I thought, a strange calm settling over me, the calm of a truth, however bizarre, finally uttered. Let them try to unravel the impossible. Alistair Finch deserved this moment of acknowledgement, however fragmented, however strange the circumstances. His work, his legacy, it's finally seeing the light of day again, and not as stolen whispers in a plagiarist's thesis. The weight of the world, or rather 2 worlds, seemed to lift ever so slightly from my 18-year-old shoulders. The fight for a grade was over. The fight for Alistair's truth and my own future had just taken a very public, very irreversible turn. 6 months later, the Boston wind whipped around me as I hurried across MIT's Killian Court, a stack of advanced topology textbooks clutched to my chest. The world had, to put it mildly, gone insane for a while. The teen Fields medalist headlines had eventually faded, replaced by more sober, and often wildly speculative, academic analyses of my archive papers. Miss Hartwell, I'd heard through the grapevine, was facing a barrage of academic fraud charges and a full investigation into her doctorate, her career in ruins, just as she deserved. Dr. Morrison had personally called to apologize for the district's initial handling of the matter, a call I'd accepted with polite, if cool, acknowledgement. And I, Alex Chen, was now officially the youngest person ever admitted to MIT's graduate mathematics program. Still feels like a dream, I'd confessed to Sarah during one of our weekly video calls. She had just laughed. Alex, you literally rewrote modern mathematics before you could legally vote. MIT's the one dreaming they snagged you. Today, she'd been particularly amused by some new campus gossip about my uncanny ability to solve problems professors had been stuck on for weeks. Seriously, Alex, she'd joked, her voice crackling slightly over the connection. Next time you have a premonition about a global academic meltdown, or, I don't know, the precise trajectory of a falling asteroid, give a girl a heads up, okay? You must be psychic. What are next week's lottery numbers? Oh, wise one? I'd chuckled, playing along. If only it were that simple, Sarah, I thought, a wry smile on my face as I recalled the conversation. Try reincarnated with the complete works and lingering trauma of a prematurely deceased mathematical genius. Doesn't quite roll off the tongue as easily as psychic, does it? Her innocent joke, however, was uncomfortably close to a truth far stranger than she could ever imagine. The theorems, the solutions that had catapulted me into this new life, were now common knowledge, or at least common discussion points in rarefied academic circles. They were Alex Chen's startling breakthroughs. But as I delved deeper into the familiar embrace of advanced research at MIT, Alistair Finch's mind reasserting its intellectual dominance within me, a more profound and unsettling question began to surface, casting a long shadow over my newfound peace. The mathematics was just the beginning, wasn't it, Alistair? I found myself thinking late one night, staring out my dorm window at the glittering Boston skyline. You were working on so much more. The real question wasn't how I, Alex Chen, knew the theorems. The world had, for the most part, grudgingly accepted the unexplained prodigy narrative, a convenient label for the inexplicable. No, the real question, the one that kept me awake long after my classmates were asleep, was what other knowledge I had brought back from my first life. Alistair Finch hadn't just been a pure mathematician. His later years had seen him veer into theoretical physics, into artificial intelligence, even into areas of research so esoteric and potentially disruptive that he'd kept them under wraps, shared only with a very select, very discreet circle of colleagues. And what about your death, Alistair? I mused, the old official story replaying in my mind. Princeton University reported it as a tragic lab accident. A sudden, localized chemical explosion in an auxiliary research wing late at night. You were supposed to be the only one there. But the details, recalled now with Alistair's own crystal-clear memory, felt wrong, inconsistent. Was it really an accident? I whispered to the unhearing city. Or was someone trying to silence you? To get their hands on that other research? The kind that doesn't get neatly published on the arXiv for peer review. A chill traced its way down my spine, a premonition far colder and more concrete than any psychic hotline could offer. I got a second chance at life, a fresh start in a young body, armed with the intellect and experiences of a genius. But it was becoming terrifyingly clear that this second chance came with strings attached. The heavy burden of Alistair's complete legacy, his dangerous secrets, and quite possibly his unfinished business with enemies I didn't yet know. Am I just Alex Chen, MIT prodigy? I wondered, the reflection in the dark glass showing a young man with old, haunted eyes. Or am I Alistair Finch, resurrected to complete a mission he never finished, to protect knowledge that certain people might kill to obtain or to suppress? The answer, I suspected, was far more complex and perilous than I was prepared for. Some discoveries, some truths, are powerful enough to reshape the world, and some people, shadowy and ruthless, would undoubtedly do anything to control that power or to extinguish the source. My mind went back to the Fields Medal, now tucked away securely. A symbol of past achievement, yes, but perhaps also a reminder of the stakes. Some secrets, I thought, a grim resolve hardening within me as I turned from the window, the path ahead dark and uncertain, are worth dying for. The real question now, the one that would define this second existence, was terrifyingly simple. Am I prepared to be the one to protect them, even if it means risking it all over again?